All right, my friends, I got the high sign, so away we go. Welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for coming and being here tonight. We're so glad to have you here at the Boise Center. We do want to thank our partners, FY Idaho, Pathways of Idaho, BPA Health. Thank you all for coming and sharing your resources with us tonight.
And you can see some of those sponsors and get some of their information outside if you walk through. Next to the pastries, you can see some pamphlets, some handouts, anything that you might have questions about as we get through the evening. May be brought up, and you can kind of call them and be in touch with them and kind of figure it all out from there. And speaking of that, the handouts, if you walked in, some people walking in with this folder here by Boise State Public Radio on the outside. This is on the outside, but on the inside, there is a booklet. And inside we have a description and a bio of all of the panelists for this evening. Plus there's a spot where you can kind of take notes, both inside and outside. So if anything comes up in a discussion that you didn't bring anything to write on, use this, feel free. And there's also some like starter questions in there too that might kind of spur on some thoughts you might have and some questions that you might want to have for the panel this evening.
My name's Troy Oppie. I am the local host of All Things Considered, weekday afternoons on Boise State Public Radio. If you're a listener, you're probably like, well, you haven't been on in the afternoons lately. I've been taking care of the morning shift. George Prentice, by the way, sends his regards. We hope to get him back soon. But Boise State Public Radio is Idaho's NPR station. We are a nonprofit, member-supported, community-driven radio and news and information resource. We are so glad to be partnering with KTVB to put on this event because this is obviously a very important conversation. It comes up in the news that we cover seemingly day to day, and you're all here because it's an important topic in our community.
Yes, and my name is Brian Holmes. I'm with KTVB. Been here for a while. Not me, but the station has. Just celebrated our 70th anniversary this past summer. I have been at the station for a bit. Moved to Boise in '99. Met my wife at Channel 7. We have four kids. Right? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 4 kids. So anyway, one of them out of college, so we've been through that whole process. Another one in college. You have 2 in high school. So we're kind of in that mix of kind of what we're talking about tonight, and I have lots of questions. You'd think by this point maybe he's got it all figured out, not even close. And so I'm sure that's why a lot of you are here, because you don't. But KTVB is proud to be part of this because, as you mentioned, Troy, we do a lot of stuff like this, and we want to let people know the resources that are available. We've done several stories on this over the years. I think the most recent one that comes to mind, I have a show called The 208, a news show that we do, and we kind of get the ability to get in and get in depth on stuff. And I think we did something on Bronco Bold a couple of years ago that Boise State does with their student athletes and mental health awareness there. We cover things with the State House, and I think the one that stands out to me most recently is this past session. They did try to give resources or more resources to public schools when it comes to telehealth. And you may remember, if you're keeping up with that, it did pass the House, but it never made it out of the Senate. So there's those kind of things that we look at and go, well, why is that not happening, or why is it, being stalled, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what we do.
If you've followed Boise State Public Radio on social media, you may have seen recently our Mind Matters series, conversations about mental health and resources and information there. If you have not seen that, you can find that on our Instagram page. Search Boise State Public Radio for that and check that out. You'll see coverage of this event, or you'll hear coverage of this event on the radio tomorrow. You'll see it on our website as well. And then you may have noticed the signs in the room as you came in. This is being recorded. We're not broadcasting live, but this will be shared in its entirety after the fact online. There'll be more information about that coming later.
Yeah, there's a possibility. So we'll see how that plays out tonight with the questions and stuff. And so I think what we're going to do is kind of we've introduced ourselves, but now you want to know who's on the panel here. And I mentioned Boise State. Let's start first with Megan Smith. So kind of, in a nutshell, kind of tell us what you do, who you are, and how you do it.
Sure. Thanks for being here tonight. Each and every one of you is so important here, so I really appreciate it. I'm a faculty member at Boise State. I'm an associate professor in our brand new School of Public and Population Health. And I'm what they call a prevention scientist. So I focus on the science of how to do prevention well. So hopefully, if I do my job well and I work together with communities to do that job well, then we can actually prevent some of these things, hopefully in our communities and throughout the state. I'm also an adolescent health specialist, and I come to this area of work because I used to be a classroom teacher. So I used to teach 7th through 12th grade in a very tiny rural mountain town. So that's why I taught 7th through 12th, and I also taught math, science, English, and drama, because that's what you do in a small town. And so I came to this work with adolescent health and with prevention because of those experiences with the teenagers in my life at that time. And just knowing that I could teach a lesson pretty well, but there were so many other needs that young people were coming into my classroom with. And so I went back to school and got my doctorate. And really focused in on how do we build the best possible school environment at the time. And then over the years have worked with a very successful substance use prevention for young people called the Icelandic prevention model. That work has brought me to think about prevention not only in the school environment, but also in the community at large. And so I'm excited to talk about that with all of you here tonight.
Megan, thank you. Vashti, before we get to you, I do want to call folks' attention to a Slido question. It's up on the screens. You can respond to that by either pointing your camera at the QR code there, or you can go to the website address and enter that code to answer that question. So feel free, take out your phones right now and do that if you would like. And Vashti, let's continue our introductions with you.
Thank you, and I'll echo what Megan said. Thanks to everyone for coming out tonight. My name is Vashti Somerville, and I wear a couple hats. I'm a parent coach, and I work primarily with parents of struggling adolescents and young adults. And then I'm a therapeutic consultant. So I work for a Seattle-based practice, and I kind of work in parallel with clinicians. I'm not a clinician. My background is in education, and when families have to make that really difficult decision to place their child in residential treatment, then I put on my therapeutic consulting hat. So I spend a good chunk of time touring programs along the continuum of care across the country. And then when a family comes to us needing that service, we do a pretty intensive assessment process to just help identify what level of care is needed and match that family with appropriate services. And then I do a little upstream work. I'm a mindfulness-based stress reduction instructor. And then I recently published a book just trying to, put some help out there. There's so much suffering. I'm also a parent, and I changed careers. I was a music teacher, probably taught 1,000 kids in Boise. I see some parents in this room of kids I've taught. And I was noticing changes in students, a lot more behavioral issues, kids identifying with extreme anxiety, depression, more medication, and then the rubber was hitting the road with my own kids at that time. The adolescent journey was starting, and I have quite a bit of lived experience from our journey. So it was a matter of sort of combining my years in education with lived experience to sort of see how I could make an impact and help parents going through challenging moments. So that's me.
Maya, would you take some time to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Maya Ledgerwood. I have my bachelor's, my master's, and my doctorate in social work, so I love the field of social work. I'm a clinical social worker. Never thought I wanted to do counseling. I was like, I'm not doing counseling. I'm just going to be a social worker, but then found myself intrigued by the possibilities. And so most of my experience is in the medical health field with nursing homes, hospice, and then a rural health clinic and critical access hospital up in northern Idaho. So I've worked really the lifespan in helping people through a lot of medical and mental health crises. I'm a faculty member at Northwest Nazarene University for their Masters of Social Work program. So I don't have any fancy schmancy stuff, but I'll do my best.
Well, we are certainly glad you're all here. Let's take a moment and please welcome our panelists and thank them for being here. I am enjoying seeing these responses to the question, what is your mental health superpower? Counseling, listening with care, stoicism, I feel that one. Compartmentalization, I feel that one out there too.
Yeah, I was just going to say that would fit in there. But empathy's standing out pretty big on that one. Obviously, a lot of people are saying that this EQ, this empathy quotient instead of the IQ, that kind of is getting a lot of attention lately. I think some people pay attention to that, probably more, or not enough, I should say. when it comes to mental health, and I think that's kind of the crux of all of this. I think, I don't know, when it comes to a superpower, I had this question when I saw this. Is that something you do well? Is that what we're supposed to understand? Or is that just something you do? Obviously, it has to be something you do well. It's something you do to handle things, or that you just do to survive. How's that defined? Is there a definition?
Both sound pretty super. If you're surviving, you're doing a great job.
I think of the superpower as what makes you effective. You know,
Okay.
like this is a thing when the crisis said, I'm in. That thing.
So what makes you effective? And you know the path that you're going to take and feel good about that.
Well, if you think of like, you know, the Marvel cast of superheroes, they all are, you know, have power and they use it with others and with themselves when they have to solve a problem.
Using that superpower, she said, for anyone who couldn't hear like the cast of Marvel does. Megan, let's get into something a little bit here. I want you to talk a little bit more about upstream prevention. What is it?
Sure, yeah, that's a great question. And I have some slides, but interested in questions and sort of a conversation too. I am the founding director of an organization or an initiative that some of you may know. I recognize some faces out in the audience. And this is an initiative called Communities for Youth. And our entire goal is to help communities access and perform upstream prevention. Next slide. And so this is some pictures of our team. So we employ lots of graduate students, and they help us with what we call our listening sessions and our focus groups. Some of you may have met some of these folks over the year if you've come to any of our meetings in Boise. We're also located out in Marsing and up in Wood River, West Ada, and Nampa. And we've done a little work up in Coeur d'Alene as well as Twin Falls. So you may have seen us around. But our goal is to help communities think about how do we build the best possible place for kids. So often we spend a lot of time hand-wringing around the crisis, right? Identifying how big the problem is and just kind of getting stuck there. And early on, our team went around and listened to parents and adults around our communities, and they frequently would say something like, obviously I want to do something for this mental health crisis that young people are facing, but what am I supposed to do? I don't know anything. I'm not a mental health care provider. And so a lot of our role, and it's such an exciting and such a, I'm so grateful to get to do this work, is to help communities and adults see what they can be doing in that space. Next slide, please. And so I know upstream prevention for some of us is a bit jargony, and I apologize for that. I am the worst, so I will say jargon. I'll try to unpack it a little bit, but the idea is there are things, and in fact, all of us, when we take a second, know there are things outside of our individual selves that impact our mental and emotional health. Right? And so we often in science, some more jargon for you, call these risk factors or protective factors. And these are things that make it either more likely for you to have something like a mental health crisis, right? Things like experiencing family violence, things like substance using peers, those things make it more likely to have a mental health crisis. So we call that a risk factor. We also have these beautiful things called protective factors, right? And so this can be something like having a really positive, safe, trusted adult in your life outside of your family. That can be something that we see protects young people from having mental health challenges. And so these are the types of things that we look at when we think about upstream prevention. And we think about how do we, in this specific community, look at our specific risk and protective factors for young people and think about what in our community is going well, where are our protective factors, and how do we bolster those up and make sure they get to as many kids as possible in this community. And then we also say, where are our red flag areas or our risk areas? What are the things that are sort of leading to these bad outcomes we want to avoid? And then we try to come together as a community, both talking to the community, which is hugely important, and also marrying that with the research, the evidence from other places, and putting those things together and saying, how do we work to get rid of some of these risk factors or reduce them for as many kids as possible? And so really, I am all on that upstream prevention, right? And so often when I say I do youth mental health, people assume I'm a clinician, and I will just say right up front, I am not. I will never do one-to-one therapy with anybody because that's not where I do. I really live in this prevention space. Next slide. Just to give you a sense of sort of the upstream prevention process that may be happening in a community for you, we're here in Boise, so some of you all have been to our meetings. But we start by building a group of humans who wants to say, yep, we're in. We're going to work together to build the best possible community for kids. And you know what's cool about that is that so many of you know some of those things already, just by virtue, hopefully, of the great experiences you had in your childhood, right? Maybe you had a coach that was really beneficial to you. Maybe you had really cool activities that you felt connected to. Maybe you had awesome friends who just held you through hard times, right? All those things are part of what makes an environment very protective for young people. And so we first start by just building the team. We say, who wants to help us build the best possible community for kids? And I mean everybody. I will talk to everybody from a paramedic to a grandma to a clinician. Everybody's invited. We are not about keeping people out of that work because everyone has a role to play. If we want to change the youth mental health crisis, we all have to be doing something in that space. And I think for many, many years, we've put it on mental health care providers, right? And often in the last couple of years, we've also put it on teachers. And no one group of humans, despite their superpowers, is going to solve the problem. The problem is great, and so our response needs to be great. So then the next thing, and this is a really cool step for me. Oh, go back, please, sorry. They're like, move on, Meg. I can get talky. So the next step is we collect youth voice. And so what this means, and often the best practice, is we do a survey. So here in Boise, we had great opportunity to run a survey. In 2022, we collected data from 80% of middle and high school students in Boise. That is an incredible response rate. It means we can feel very confident in our data. To give you comparisons, other state surveys have response rates of like 15% to 20%, which means it's not really capturing the population of young people. So it's hard to make assessments and inferences from that. So anyway, we collected great data in Boise, and I will share some of that data with you here in a moment. But you can feel relatively confident that the data I share with you today does represent Boise youth. So if you're a Boise adult in some way, it might be really interesting for you to look at that data. So we collect that youth voice, and that helps us do some things, right? When we can put that data in to a predictive model and look at the unique risk and protective factors for young people in Boise, it can help us navigate where do we need to focus our attention, right? So many people, right, do so much good intentioned work, right? We have incredible professionals doing all sorts of programs and things like this, but unfortunately, if they don't have the navigational tool to be focused on the thing that is actually a need for young people, we might be doing a lot of work and resource spending and effort that's not really what our young people need, right? And so the data helps us navigate. The data also helps us check our work. So if we're trying things and we're like, we think this is working, right? Data actually allows us to say, oh, it's not working. We got to retool, right? And so that's the really beautiful part of collecting youth voice and why data and surveys are so important. And I know there are a lot of feelings about surveys out in the world. And I know there are a lot of feelings about surveys of young people out in the world. And I will say the survey is completely anonymous. So we will never know an individual's unique responses, right? It's at the population level that we're looking at it. And if you are someone that believes in the importance of this data, I would really hope that you help us talk to other parents in your community about the utility of this, okay? I will say the survey data lives and is for the community, right? So all the data is shared back out with the community, and it is for us to take action. It is not for any other purpose, right? So it's really important that we share that message with folks because last summer, our legislatures passed what's called a Parents' Rights Bill, which is awesome. It has great intentions for protecting folks. But it also makes it so that surveys have to be opt-in, which is a new process for parents. And so it's really helpful if you share that message with folks that it's important to opt into that survey. And I do believe you all got, if you're a Boise district parent, you probably got a contact about it already. This third step is we set goals. So what we try to do is we look at that data, we run the predictive models, and we say, here's some of the top risk and protective factors in this community in real time. We're talking 2 weeks after we have the data. So we're talking about kids in that school, in that community right now. Not 2 years later like YRBS, right? Right now, this is what our kids are facing. And we set some goals with the community. Do I set the goals? Nope, I'm not the community, I don't know. So we share the data with the community and they tell us. And so here in Boise, you'll hear a lot about social connection because that is the goal that this community has set for young people. And then finally, the fourth step, we're kind of doing it tonight, y'all, so thank you for being in the fourth step with me. This is keep the conversation going. So the idea is, the goal would be, if I ask some random person on the street, what are we doing for youth mental health in Boise? They say we're building connection for young people. And so that's what we're doing. We're keeping the conversation alive, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Next slide, sorry. I'm used to driving myself. So here's a look at the data. So again, this represents 80% of middle and high school students in Boise. And this is on depressive symptomology. So this is a clinical scale. And what we're showing you here in percentages are what we call moderate to severe depression symptomology. And so this is pretty striking, I would say. It's higher than the national average for sure. And the thing to know about this is the reason we report at this cut point is because this is when, if a clinician saw this, they would suggest treatment. They would say there needs to be some kind of treatment plan for someone at a moderate to severe level. And so you can see across grades here on the screen, starting at 7th grade through 12th, and then the boys are represented in blue and girls are represented in orange. And so you can see the difference of rates across.
Can I ask you a question then?
Yes.
The percentage of boys versus girls, does
Yes.
that surprise you, or did that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me. Nationally, girls report higher rates of depressive symptomology. Some of that is gendered, right? It's just the way in which boys think about emotions and things like that. And I would say a lot of times people see these huge rates for girls and they go, oh gosh, we gotta save the girls. But I would say that the boys' rates are pretty high still, especially as we get into that 10th, 11th, 12th. A third of boys needing treatment for depressive symptomology is not something to look away from either. Next slide, please. So here's an example of a protective factor. So one of the great things, and hopefully all of you are representing this in some way, are supportive families. And so this is letting you know the green bar is junior high students and the blue bar is high school students. And so you can see how young people feel they are supported from their family. Again, a protective factor. And maybe in some communities, although not Boise, an area where we want to push in and kind of build up family support for young people. Next slide. Here's an example. I know you're all, and there's already questions that we took from the internet, right? I know everyone's thinking about social media and screen time, and so here's something that shows social isolation, which again was one of the main drivers of depression in Boise youth, right? So it shows that the more time we spend on a screen, probably for no surprise, actually the higher level of social isolation we feel. And again, that's important because social isolation is what's driving both ideation and depressive symptomology in Boise youth. Next slide, please. Here's one that looks at self-awareness as a protective factor. And what we mean by self-awareness here is a young person who feels a great sense of purpose in their life. So purpose can be found through like, I know what I want to be when I grow up, or it can be, I love serving this community as a volunteer, those kinds of things. And also someone who understands their moods and feelings. So you went to that EQ right off the bat, and we do see here in Boise young people that self-awareness actually is what we call protective. So you can see that people who had low self-awareness were much more likely, 61% compared to only 16%, to indicate that moderate to high level of depression, right? So you can see young people who don't have a good idea of how to understand what they're feeling and why they do what they're doing, actually struggle with depressive symptomology more. Next slide, please. This is an example of stress and a trusted adult, right? So stress is obviously a risk factor, and in fact, we see it as one of the main factors in Boise youth for depression and for ideation. However, if you look here, this is showing that Boise youth who have a trusted adult are much less stressed. Isn't that cool? Just by having a trusted adult in their life. So if you are someone who has kids in your network outside of your family, this is somewhere you can make immediate impact, right? You can just notice and recognize another kiddo out there in your network check in on them. It can be as easy at soccer practice like, hey, nice kick there earlier, right? Just that moment where they know they've been seen by you, that can really help. Next slide. Here are our social isolation rates in Boise students, and so you can see, obviously, young women are reporting slightly higher levels of social isolation, but this just helps you get a sense of, we'd love to see these numbers go down, right? If our community is doing what we're trying to do around social connection, we'd love to see these numbers go down when we survey again. Next slide. Here's an example of supportive peers in Boise. Next slide. I'm sorry, I only have 10 minutes, so I'm going fast, and I know that's a lot of data to process, but if you go to our website, all these slides are here, so you can look at them slower, and I love getting emails and talking about data. I super duper have a data nerd in me, so happy to unpack data with you at any point. But essentially what we're trying to do, when you think about upstream prevention, and I mentioned it earlier that all of us know at an individual level that our mental emotional health doesn't lie just within us. We aren't born with emotional mental health, right? Like, there are things, let's say you come home from work and you kind of like get in a fender bender with someone. That's going to impact your emotional mental health. Let's say you get in a fight with your partner about something. That impacts your mental emotional health, right? And in fact, you can see in these circles that each of these levels have an impact on young people's mental health. So mental health is a multifaceted problem, right? So there's no way we can just attack it from one thing, right? So if someone tells you we're going to solve all the mental health of young people because we're going to teach them coping skills, that's going to be a piece of the puzzle, but it's not going to be all of it. And what we try to do in upstream prevention is call people to the responsibility as the adults in this community to build the best possible place for kids, right? That is each one of our responsibilities. If we say we care about kids, that is what we need to be doing. We need to be thinking about what are the factors that make the best possible environment for young people so that they're just less likely to use substances or to experience mental health crisis. Next slide. So just to kind of summarize what we saw in the data so far is that stress and social isolation are the leading factors for depression and suicidal ideation. Both were true here. So we really are focused, again, on what I call social connection, because I like to be on the positive side, right? So the cool part is people ask, well, why aren't you focusing on stress, Megan? And it's because when we went into the research to figure out, oh, how do we mitigate stress? Do you know what the #1 protective factor for stress is? Social connection. So it was beautiful. It was like it was made for us. So it makes it real easy to focus all the way in on connection, and there are lots of tools on the website to look at that. The other things you see here are other risk and protective factors. So they're factors that we shared out with our community early on, and they just did not get selected as goals for this year. But it's still nice to know that things like lack of family support are impacting our Boise youth, right? Next slide, please. Oh, okay. I was expecting one more, but that's okay. I'll talk soon.
Well, and remind folks real quick, just because I maybe that was on that missing slide, but what is the website for folks that want to check out that data?
Oh, yeah, sure. So it's www. Duh. No, it's not duh. .communitiesforyouth, all spelled out, .org. And there'll be a link to it, I think, in a slide later on when I talk again. But just so you know, communitiesforyouth.org. And it should be on Boise Public Radio's website as well. I think we linked it in there.
Megan, just quick, I don't know if this is a quick
Sure.
answer, but a quick question. Like you say you bring this data and this information to community. Has it been, when you've done that, how well received has it been?
So that's a great question. I think when people are in the room, they're really ultimately grateful to see it. We've had people come in and be like, how dare you, talk to kids about depression. We get that for sure. And I will say in Boise, it was a bit of a slow start. So in Marsing, we have regularly meetings where 400 parents show up. And in Boise, we have not had that yet. Which is interesting because Marsing is a very tiny community, right? So Boise should be much easier to get that. And so I think we're building. This is really our first year, and it takes time for people to sort of be aware that it's happening and figure out how they want to engage. But like I said, the data, those slides that I showed you are now up on the website, and we welcome questions of all kinds.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, okay, so Vashti, we got a sneak peek of what you're going to talk about there. Just a second. But, I mean, as a parent of 4, I look at that and I think, should it be parenting with resilience or I know it's for resilience, so explain what that means.
I think creating conditions that allow our kids to cultivate resilience, because I do think we could have a whole nother workshop, parenting with resilience, because it's hard.
Yes.
It's a hard job. But I think it's sometimes with our best intentions, and I teach this stuff all the time, but I'm humbled on a daily basis with my own kids. I don't get it right, so I'll just admit that right now. We're well-meaning, but we're doing the wrong things for the right reasons often. And sometimes when our kids are starting to experience some depression or anxiety, we can inadvertently feed that with the way that we approach it. And so I am all about how do we as parents create conditions that allow our kids to build resilience. And we talked about superpowers, and I think the first parenting superpower is really learning to tame our anxiety. Anybody have some parenting anxiety in the room? Just a couple. So that's the first thing, and that's a big job. That's a tall order. And then it's working with our kids to grow their own emotional literacy, helping them become the expert, guiding them to solve their own problems. So, and some of that's, I use the word self-efficacy. You used a different word in the survey with the sense of purpose.
Oh, yeah, awareness.
Awareness,
Yeah.
self-awareness. So self-efficacy, feeling like they're capable. I think that the elephant in the room is suicidality, and I grew up in a time when I didn't know anyone who had attempted suicide or completed suicide, and we had 4 completed suicides in the Boise School District in the fall. So ultimately, we're all very, very scared of this, and that is, I think, where we are needing a little more training. So I'm gonna, let's see, I'm gonna say my last sentence on there because I thought it was good. So parents often underestimate our ability to be agents of change. And families are living systems. We are co-creating with our environment constantly. So we don't have to overhaul everything. There's these tiny little leverage points as parents that we can just change just a perspective or a little bit of languaging, and we change the dance. We force a different reaction from our kid. Next slide. So these are modes that I think we go into as parents that do not cultivate resilience or create conditions for resilience. So something big is happening, and we go into cheerlead, distract, deny, or problem solve. Maybe we bounce between most of those. I probably reside in problem solving most of the time, problem solving or cheerleading. And these are sometimes inadvertently sending a different message than we think to our kids. So problem solving might be creating the narrative, I need someone else to help me through this always. I'm not equipped inside myself to get through this. Distracting or denying, phrases like it's not that bad, right? Well, that kid's experience of it is bad in that moment. So we also don't want to train them to be scared of their feelings or to think that their feelings are wrong. And those are kind of self-explanatory, but I think that those are modes to be aware of. As something big is coming up in the home, I'm going into problem solving. Can I take a pause? And I'll get to some alternatives to these modes in a minute. And I don't want to just give a lecture. Do you have any questions on that? We have these great moderators here.
I'm seeing so much of my own parenting on this slide right now.
Same, right?
Well, and my own experience with my 2 children, which are elementary age, we've had sadness, we've had anxiety, we've had stress in the household this year that we have not experienced before. It's been one of those seasons of life for us. And so seeing, and understanding that, maybe trying to empower them to make their own decisions at the same time as you're trying to isolate them from all the bad feelings and everything, like that has been a light switch moment, and I wonder how often you see parents be able to resolve to that.
Well, it's not immediate and it's not linear. It's a process,
It's hard.
right? And the first step is just being aware, becoming more aware of when we're kind of moving into those conditioned habitual reactions to our kids. I think we can probably go to the next slide, and this will tie into it. I wish that someone had set me down when I was maybe 8 and said, here's the deal. 50% of life or more is sort of uncomfortable and uncertain. And I think as parents, at any sign of suffering, this was me, right? I mean, I say I'm going to start Overparenters Anonymous and I'll be the president. We want to, there's all the terms, helicopter parenting, snowplow parenting, we want to protect them from challenge, from these hard experiences, because it's hard to watch your kid being the one left out on the playground. It's hard watching your kid not make the soccer team or be in the midst of a lot of social drama. But those are really important things, and they're little storms, right? And I think we have a really hard job as parents discerning what is just normal life suffering, right? Kids are pathologizing a lot of things, right? Oh, I have anxiety. Hey, everyone has some anxiety. They do? Yeah, it's not all clinical. Sometimes we all get anxiety. So it's discerning between what is just like a normal life storm that has a beginning, middle, and an end, and what is something that's a warning sign for maybe needing to call Maya. And I think this image has worked really well with parents to then pass on to their kids, okay, you have a storm, it's a cloud, it's going to come, it's going to go. It is not permanent. So I think that's a really important, just EQ. You talked about EQ.
I was looking at that previous slide and I'm thinking, okay, so you recognize a lot of that, but I mean, I don't want to turn this into a personal counseling session, but
Maya, you're on.
I don't know how many in this room kind of grew up with a parent that said, you'll figure it out. And like none of that kind of registers. And so then as a parent, then you kind of go, well, I turned out all right. They'll figure it out. And so you kind of, there's the opposite of that, it seems like sometimes.
There is. What I see more of is this pendulum swing. I grew up with more of authoritarian parents. Just do what I say and you'll figure it out. And when you hear my whistle, come home for dinner, right?
Because
no one was
I
like,
said so.
Yeah,
Right.
or because I said so. But there also wasn't a lot of attunement or, checking in with how's your emotional life, or maybe you're wired differently than I think you're wired, and maybe your vision for yourself is different than my vision for you. So that might have been sort of the parenting of the past. And now the pendulum has swung to maybe overdoing it, right? And over-functioning a little bit and inadvertently. And that's not a blame. I'm pointing the finger at myself. I think we're all just doing the best we can. So that sweet spot in the middle we miss a lot. When I talk about these 4 basic parenting styles, there's neglectful and then permissive, then the 2 fancy words, authoritative and authoritarian. And authoritative is the sweet spot where you're in tune with your child's unique wiring and this EQ, right? This emotional, like these feelings, and you're able to kind of help them work through them, move through them, but also able to hold boundaries. And boundaries that I use the word life-giving, maybe that doesn't make sense, but boundaries that lead to our end goal as parents of raising capable, independent, resilient, compassionate kids. Those are boundaries worth holding. And then authoritarian is just do what I say because I said so, right? And I think when you're parenting a child who's starting to experience depression, or just teenagers in general, my favorite quote is, raising a teenager is like being pecked to death by a chicken. Because sometimes it's really hard, but that's their job, right? They're individuating. That is their job. And I just lost my train of thought with my joke.
Emotions are like clouds.
I know, no, but we're going, what was I saying right before that?
The 4 styles of parenting.
Yeah, the 4
parenting
styles. So
styles.
missing that sweet spot in the middle. So these teenagers can be prickly towards parents, and that is normal. And depressed kids can also be mean sometimes, or it can feel mean. We can personalize it as parents. So we sort of leapfrog over that sweet spot. We're either trying to soften the world too much for them because we are so sad about their suffering. We're sad. Their world is hard. So we soften and go into problem solve, cheerlead, distract, deny. Or now they're being pokey, and so we leap over the sweet spot to like, give me your phone, or then here comes the punishment, or you're grounded. And we're doing this, and I think it's causing whiplash for everyone. So it's how do we land in that sweet spot? That was a little bit of a tangent. Next slide. So I like this tool of the learning zones. This is part of that emotional intelligence. So we have our comfort zone, and I think a lot of us as humans think anytime we step out of our comfort zone, we're in our panic zone, we're overwhelmed, and we forget there's this middle zone, this stretch zone, this learning zone. And sometimes just asking myself that question, I'm like, oh, I'm really not panicked. I'm just in that challenge zone. And this is a great tool to use with kids, teaching them there's that middle zone too, where you're out of your comfort zone, because your comfort zone can get boring and stagnant. And so just taking a minute and saying, I'm not in my comfort zone, but am I truly in panic or overwhelm, or am I kind of in my stretch zone? Next slide. This is another tool I love with emotional literacy, right? Name it to tame it. I don't know if that's actually a Dan Siegel, who's a psychiatrist, if that's his quote directly, but it's in all his books. This mood meter came out of the Yale Child Study Center, the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And the idea is, if you can name at a more nuanced level what you're feeling, one, you're sort of moving out of this emotional space in your brain into more of your thinking brain. And as we're trying to cultivate resilience with our kids, it's helping them map their inner world and move beyond, I'm just sad, I'm happy, I'm bored. And so a vocabulary, there's a feelings wheel, there's this mood meter, there's a lot of different tools. You probably use several of them, but just working with our kids to say, okay, I see that things are not great. The blue and red on this particular tool are negative, can be considered negative emotions. Red is high energy negative, and then the blue is low energy negative, where the more pleasant emotions are the green and the yellow, and green is more low energy pleasant, and then yellow is high energy pleasant. And we don't always have to be in the yellow. We don't have to, we need to learn to move through all this, but I think the point is, when our child is experiencing a big feeling and we're gonna jump into problem solving and fix that, or go get an ice cream cone, let's take a beat and say, what are you feeling now? And let's look beneath the iceberg. And that's another slide I didn't put in because I have too many slides, I like slides. There's an iceberg analogy where the behavior that we see, the eye rolling, slamming doors, school refusal, cutting, substance use, whatever it is, that's a message for what's going on. I need to feel belonging. I need to feel hopeful. I am seeking security. So this tool also helps kind of just dive underneath what is going on underneath there, instead of just focusing on the behavior and maybe really missing what's going on underneath. So this is really important in guiding kids to be solvers of their own problems. First of all, being able to name what it is they're feeling. Okay, next slide. So the core of the relationship with the child is the way they believe you see them. So one of the narratives that can come out of over problem solving is my parent doesn't see me as capable. I'm going to add on to this. I love the Maya Angelou quote. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I did an exercise for myself once, and for a podcast that I did, I was like, I wonder how I make my kids feel. So I wrote a script of a day in the life with my kids, and we're going through all our activities and the limited little pockets before and after school and after dinner. And, it was just this, did you unload the dishwasher? I asked you to do that. Get your coat. It's cold outside. Did you pack your lunch? Did you talk to your math teacher? Blah, blah, blah. And I thought, it's awful to be my kid. Like, that's terrible. There was just so much correction and teaching because, we have our parent hat on. We're in the role of the parent, and we need to get all this stuff out there. And sometimes just being aware that maybe the relationship bank account is a little empty because we're just nitpicking. So taking a breath and saying, okay, here's a pause, and is this communication meant to control or correct in some way, or is it meant to connect? And just taking a minute and saying, can I opt for connection a little more? Do we really have to nag about every single thing? And that kind of ties into this slide here. Next slide. So as we talk about resilience, this came out of the Yale Child Study Center. So the SPACE program, that stands for Supportive Parenting of Anxious Childhood Emotions. And this wonderful researcher, Ellie Leibovitz, I've had the privilege of attending a workshop with him. It's wonderful. It's a parent-based intervention. The studies have been primarily around anxiety and OCD, but he's broadening that to young adults who are really struggling with launching, kids on the spectrum. And it's looking at what accommodations we're making for our kids to mitigate the anxiety or whatever the presenting problem is. And his research has shown that the more accommodations we make, the worse the presenting issue becomes. So he has this formula. Support is validation. Yeah, this is hard. This is a really distressing moment for you, plus confidence. And I am 100% confident in your ability to handle this distress. It's a very different message. And he has a whole process for announcing to your kid that you're no longer going to do the accommodations that are inadvertently feeding the problem. There's a book by him. You can probably just look up the space program and Ellie Leibovitz and see if you can find this book. But I think that's a really great exercise to just come up with some little phrases that fit you and your family. This is rough. And you know what? You can handle it. You can handle it. Next slide. Because we're going to go back to protective factors, a sense of capability and agency, ability to navigate your life. They are mental health protective factors, right? You're the clinician. Is that true information? Okay, I got the thumbs up. So I think that's really important to remember that there's a bigger reason for doing this. Next slide. So guiding kids to be solvers of their own problems. I love creating guiding questions that aren't just yes or no questions. And I think I can read it. I might need my glasses. So just before we jump in, we're taking that pause. And when you want to problem solve, just biting your tongue a little bit and saying, okay, what's the most important thing to you right now? Tell me more, drawing out more information from the child. What word best describes how you're feeling? What solutions do you see? What are your ideas? What are your thoughts on this? I have a few more that didn't make the slide deck. What's in your control right now? What is in your control to your child? Helping them understand, place your focus on what you can control and work to move through that which you cannot control. I love this question for teens. Okay, what thinking habits or maybe physical habits do you have right now that are holding you back or that are contributing to this? I also love this question you have to tailor these. I'm not going to ask a 6-year-old that, but for the older, as they get older, these are really appropriate. What is one thing you can do today that your future self will thank you for? What's the next best step you can take? So this to me creates conditions for resilience as opposed to us telling or problem solving. That was a lot of words. Do you have any questions?
I just think this I have a lot of work to do. I see that and I hear those things, but it's a lot to digest.
Yeah.
And so when you say these things to a kid in a moment, like, I know this is hard, but I think you can do it, that doesn't always go over so well.
And then you might follow that up with, what are your ideas, right? You're not going to sit your kid down and pepper them with all these questions. That's not good. Or questions disguised as a lecture, because no teen ever said, please give me a lecture. Right, and so it's I think, Brian, it's aiming to just be 1% better than you were the day before, right? So maybe that validating phrase, I see this is hard, and I really do believe you're capable. What are your ideas? I don't have any. Well, let's talk about that some more, and really spending some time connecting and drawing out their own genius.
And I think that, if I can just interject,
Yeah.
I think the important thing with that is to be curious, to be really curious about what your child is saying or the person you're talking to, not just reading off questions just to ask questions, but really being curious and wanting to know what the answers are. And that's easier said than done, because we want to ask all the right questions and we want to be like, oh, if I ask this, they'll say this, or I can get this information. But really being mindful in the moment to listen to what they have to say and be curious about why they're saying that.
Agree.
Right? Right.
Texting will not work, yeah.
Well, sometimes.
Even if they're upstairs, right?
Yeah.
But you're right, and curiosity is another parenting superpower, and our kids are really perceptive. And I just read some study, it's like some huge percentage of communication is not even verbal, right? So they can pick up when it is a question disguised as a lecture, or when you're not really curious. And that's the other thing is timing of conversations. Like when anyone's nervous system is dysregulated, like that switch is flipped, either party, that's not the time to have this conversation. And also you might have a conversation like this without expecting a resolution and being just sitting in the uncertainty of it, just having a little brainstorm session. But I think they can pick up on if you're really curious or if you're like, wait, let me get my notes and I'm going to ask, these different things. So that's a great point.
Yeah, to add on to that, looking at that chart of the mood, was it the mood meter?
mood meter, yeah.
Sometimes is it okay to sometimes have to sit with those feelings and figure it out, just like it's okay to sit and be bored and you hear sometimes, I don't like being bored because then I have these thoughts or whatever. I don't like my own thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that's nuanced, right? So thoughts are not facts. That's
Right.
another thing I wish someone had said to me. And some of our feelings that just kind of pass through all the noise up there are just neurons firing. And some of our feelings are there because something sad happened, right? They're, a loss. That's not something that we're going to move through quickly. That's real. We have to sit with that. But then there's sometimes, you're feeling a little sad, but maybe you sat on your phone for 4 hours and that caused it. Or your brain is playing tricks on you. So it's discerning between what's a feeling that's there because something situational really is going on. I talk about the feelings of guilt with kids. Sometimes guilt exists as a course corrector. Like we can feel guilty because maybe we weren't honest or we hurt our friends' feelings in some way. So it's there to shape us and say, okay, well, how am I going to do that better next time? And then there's made up guilt. I mean, our brains are tricky, tricky. And I think we're just in the beginnings of understanding how it all works. But it's teaching kids, too, that there's micro moods. There's just these things that flit through. And then there's things that require more attention or have more weight. But I would say there's a huge percentage that are just the clouds going like this, based on my experience as a human.
Vashti, I don't want to jump if you have more slides, but I do want to
I just have the wrap-up slide.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
I have some questions.
So
for
we'll
Vashti.
just, in case you want to take a picture of that, just some parenting for resilience tips. So embracing discomfort and uncertainty and modeling, being able to sit in that as parents. Resisting over-involving and problem-solving. So where are we overdoing it? What can we turn over to them? Are we still ordering for our 7th grader in a restaurant? I think kids are losing a lot of face-to-face communication skills because we are on our phones. So can we start turning over things like that to them to sort of provide practice and mitigate some of this social anxiety that we see so much of? You have a junior in high school that needs a physical for sports. Can they fill out the paperwork, right? So turning over those things and giving us a break too, right? That's a lot of minutia as parents to keep track of. So on their runway to independence, turning over more and more things. Guiding youth to be solvers of their own problems. Using guiding questions in an authentic and curious way and not peppering them with them, but helping them really start to tap into their own genius, because our kids really are their own best expert in so many ways. I say wrap them in the right kind of bubble wrap, and the right kind of bubble wrap to me is our confidence in their ability to be able to learn their way through anything. That's the right kind of bubble wrap. Owning our own part and getting good at repair. I make more mistakes than I get things right. So I'm, working at modeling repairing. Or biting my tongue and not having to correct all the time. And when we have a bad parenting day or a bad parenting season, showing some self-compassion. You're a good parent who's just having a bad day. When your kid is really acting out, they're a good kid just going through a really rough patch. But we're assuming goodness, their innate goodness. Our innate goodness is still there. Okay, one more slide. So just you can kind of just take a picture of this. You don't need to hear me talk anymore. Yeah.
Maya, I'm very interested as someone who is doing this experience with my own family. How have you seen the conversations that you're having with kids change and evolve in the short term or maybe over the longer term as well?
Sure. I think parents are really more fearful. I think there's a lot of fear right now that we've seen. I mean, it definitely started before the pandemic, and then once the pandemic started, we saw those isolations and moods did dip pretty low during that time, and so we haven't bounced back. Some people haven't bounced back like maybe is optimal for them, and so I do see parents asking more questions about mental health and having more, especially in the rural areas, having the ability to have those conversations. I still see a lot of stigma around mental health, like there must be something wrong with, I mean, we're all dysfunctional, right? I mean, if you're a functioning human being, you're dysfunctional somewhere. I mean, so, but just a lot of stigma around there. I think it's changing, but I do think, that there's a long way to go. I think we use mental health phrases really, especially adolescents, like, she's so bipolar, you know? And it's like, okay, you know, we have a diagnostic book that tells us what the signs and symptoms are of bipolar, and it's not someone that over the same course of a day goes through highs and lows. That's not what bipolar is. But we as a society have latched onto some words and have used it to misinform maybe and to stigmatize some of those things. So that's kind of what I'm seeing right now.
We were talking earlier about the importance of having an adult figure to children, and I'm curious if folks want to be an adult figure to someone in their life, but there is that stigma. What are some different ways tactics that you use to kind of break that down?
I think that the more the adults, and this is just my opinion, but I think the more the adult wants to really understand themselves, the better they are at understanding other people and the more empathy they have with other people. So I would say not just looking at those people, but looking at ourselves and like, what are some emotions that I feel that aren't healthy, or what are some thoughts that I have that aren't healthy, and how can I change those to be a better person so that I can be a better influence on somebody else, to make them say, okay, it's okay to be vulnerable sometimes, and say, I'm not perfect, and I struggle with this, or I struggle with that. And the more that we start having those really real conversations and not just pretending like everything's okay, I think the more we start understanding that everybody has a lot of similar feelings. And yeah.
You're going to guide us through an activity here in a few minutes, and you'll tell us more about it then, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it sounds a little bit like you're talking there about self-resourcing.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, too, the mental health, one of the things I wanted to share tonight is that the mental health system is changing, not fast enough or have enough resources fast enough. But, one of the reasons why I didn't want to do counseling when I first became a social worker was like, I don't want a couch where somebody's laying on a couch and I'm smoking a pipe and, with my, Watson hat on or whatever. But I think we have so many different methods of therapy now that we even have short-term therapy that we are finding a lot of evidence to support that even 5 sessions can be helpful for someone. So there's a difference between long-term counseling and short-term counseling that people can get. And so it's not like you have to commit to 2 or 3 years of counseling once a week for 2 hours a week like it used to be. Now, counselors will see someone for 6 sessions and really work on the biggest problem or the biggest thing that's creating a barrier in their life. And so I think getting around some of that new evidence of, hey, we can, tackle this one problem. And a lot of times if you tackle that one major problem, it radiates to other things in your life. And so just understanding that therapy is not what it used to be. And I think one of the big things that's underused is a lot of places have EAP, the employee assistance programs, that don't get accessed quite enough. If you access the mental health system, you have to get a diagnosis to get to your insurance company. That's how we come up with how we bill for services. But in EAP, a lot of times it can be life circumstances, and you don't have to have a diagnosis that goes with that. to access those services.
And I'll just highlight, if you are a Boise School District parent, this is a really cool opportunity because we have something called BPA Health that's available for every student and every family member of a student and their immediate family, 5 free counseling sessions per incident. So, and this very underutilized, but it's paid for already, so it's free. You should use it. It's just sitting there. And so I just like to highlight BPA Health for that. And some of you may have met with Annie Reeder. She was out in the hall earlier.
Maya, one more question before we get into an activity here. I am curious to know if there are parallels between what we see on the news and what's happening socially and the problematic issues, the stressors that kids in particular are coming to your office with.
So I think depression and anxiety are always a big factor for across the lifespan. I think social isolation right now is really making negative emotions worse. I know that even, as colleges, I've told Megan this before, even freshmen in colleges are not having the same experience that they used to have. You used to go to the dorm and you go to clubs and you do all this stuff. And now freshmen are sitting in their rooms on their phone, and we're seeing isolation in dorm rooms. And so I think that there's a lot of isolation that's going on that just contributes to stuff. What I really tell people is the biggest red flag, if you could have like the big red flag, is hopelessness is one of the biggest red flags, and then lack of total motivation to even get out of bed. Those are the things where I would say you need to get help immediately. And of course, if they are threatening to hurt themselves or other, but that sense of hopelessness is really a big red flag for people. So hopefully that is helpful.
Well, then let's do a...
We talk too much.
Yeah, no, this is fantastic conversation. Let's do an activity. Megan, you're going to lead us in some brainstorming.
Sure. Yeah, I just thought we'll quickly walk through some things, and I thought as an audience, we could actually think about ways in which we could impact social connection for Boise youth in our own unique ways, because it's going to take each of us, like I said, we have a role to play in this great mental health challenge, but the good news is we don't have to stop with, oh gosh, it's a problem and it's so terrible, I'm going to look away. We all have agency and we can all do something to impact connection. So we can move through these. These are just other little summaries of the data. Sometimes I like to make sure I have that just in case. One more slide. Keep going. All right. So back to this sort of thing, the idea is we are going to increase connection. And in fact, our effort is working to increase connection at each of these levels. And we think most of you probably live in that interpersonal level. So when you're thinking about kids in your own network, whether it be in your own family and how you can connect, I think Vashti and Maya have both given us some ideas about how to connect first before we're correcting or before we're problem solving. Believe me, that is my hardest strategy. I struggle with that with my own. And then I think also many of us exist at these other levels and have impact in these other levels. So thinking about, a lot of times when we do community meetings, we meet with organizations in Boise that are serving young people or helping in the community in some way. And so thinking about how can your organization, right, whether it be an adult or youth serving organization, how can your organization reach out either to your adult population about how important connection is and some of the ways that folks can connect, right? Or how can your organization include youth in the work? So one of the early things that came out in our community meetings here in Boise was folks were like, well, it sounds great. We want teens to be volunteering, but every time we look up volunteer opportunities, no one's taking teen volunteers. Aha. So now it's incumbent on y'all, if you have an organization, thinking about how, as an organization, do we incorporate young people into our work? And there'll be some cool partner videos of folks who have made that decision. For instance, Tree Fort is one of our partners, and they have been working with young people And now those young people, still as high school folks, are paid on staff. So it's a very cool opportunity. But so I thought we could just take a minute and brainstorm, and we're going to do it on our own at first, and then I'm just going to warn you, we're going to share with our neighbors, whatever those are. We're going to model that awkward connection bit. But I want you to think about wherever you feel like in your life you have some agency or you have some control over impacting connection for young people. So it might be interpersonally. Maybe you have a neighbor kid in your neighborhood that you could check on. You know, and I don't mean in a weird way. Like, people are like, am I supposed to be like, are you feeling depressed? No, of course not. You're not supposed to do that, right? But it's something like, oh, hey, I noticed you on your skateboard the other day. Pretty cool, man. That's all it needs to be, because what you're doing is creating an avenue that if they needed someone, they would think of you, right? They think, oh, that person's pretty nice. Because here's the thing that I tell people, and it's devastating, I understand. Some of us are trying to be the perfect parent, right? And all of us are, of course. We're all perfect parents. We have perfect kids. Even in that relationship where we're all perfect, right? Young people at the teen level are meant to. It's healthy development. They have to, right? To do it well, they have to individuate from us. Which means even if we have the closest, best relationship, they are not going to want to always come to us, right? As they get older, it's actually healthy for them to not want to come to us. I know that's hard. But the cool thing is, that's why we can be trusted adults for other young people, and also to help our young people notice other trusted adults. So for instance, my best friend, I always talk about how she's a safe person that my daughter can go to. Hey, if you don't want to talk to us about it, you know Jenny, you can talk to Jenny. Right? And so those are the kinds, yeah, Sarah, I see you. She knows Jenny too, and my daughter. But so those are the kinds of things that we can do to help, right? And so thinking about this, maybe you're going to think about an interpersonal thing. And I want you to think about something that you can do, like this week, okay? I'm going to challenge you. So something at the interpersonal level, perhaps you work at a school, right? If you're a school professional, think about how do we build connection into the normal practices that we do, right? Like I said in the beginning, I am a teacher, and so I came to the work of teaching because I care about kids and wanted to see them grow, right? And so as teachers, we can reorient ourselves again to that original goal, right? And so some of us might get wrapped up. Believe me, I taught math. I know the standards are crazy, and we're always worried about not hitting proficiency. I get it, right? But reap the benefits of 10 minutes at the beginning of your classroom period, forcing connection, right? And so I've actually started doing this in my undergrad classes, because Maya mentioned in college young people are struggling with loneliness as well. And so in the first 15 minutes of every class I teach, no matter if it's statistics or collaborating for change, we spend the first 15 minutes asking personal questions of each other and sharing. And I will tell you what, it is amazing. At the end, the students are like, oh my gosh, I've never talked to other students in my class, which is mind-dropping to some of us, because what? You're in a room with them for 16 weeks and you don't know anyone, right? And so these are the kinds of things that school officials can be thinking about and doing. And then maybe you're a community leader. We talked about some examples of the ways community leaders can impact youth connection. If you're a policymaker in the room, love to talk to you. But let's think about the policies that support young people connecting, right? So one of the things early on, I'll give you an example of a school we were collecting data at, and they said, gosh, all these partners are so cool. They come in and do all these after-school programs at our school, and nobody comes, right? And so here we are in this community, and we're like, well, why? Here's all these great resources. Well, they found out that the young people in that school were from a particular demographic that had to go home on the school bus or had no way home, right? And so again, at the policy level right now, what we're trying to do with Boise Transportation is give those students, particularly in that school, free bus passes so they could get home after those after-school activities. It's a very unique, right, solution that's specific for that community and their needs. So now I'm going to stop talking, I promise. I want you to take a minute to yourself and think about which at these levels can you do to increase, and I mean real stuff, y'all. This is not you get out of jail free card. This is you think about it in your own context, what you're going to do. I'll give you a minute, and then I'll have you share with people around you, okay? All right, and you can start sharing with people around you if you like. Maybe you guys can bounce ideas off each other, share those ideas with each other.
There's the sweetest neighbor who's a retired teacher. And like, there's like this whole new influx of little kids on my block. And she just has little art classes at her house, like for free. You just come down and do art with Mary once a week, and that's a great little
That's
thing,
nice.
you know.
Yeah.
I don't know, and I grew up with the candy lady on the block. Did you have a candy lady on your block? So there was always one
yeah.
older woman.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Huh? Do you know what time? How are we doing on time? Do you know? I don't know either.
I trust the timekeeper.
Yes.
Because you're doing Dear Man.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you done Dear Man before?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Could I read it? No, but I've done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
With one of my own kids.
Yeah.
All right, and we'll take about 1 more minute to wrap up your conversations. It's weird to teach from a seat.
I
You
know.
like this is a classroom activity I would do, but I'm in a seat. It's funny. All right, and we'll come on back up front, let those conversations settle. I can tell there's some good ideas out there in the room. Anybody feeling really brave and bold and want to share with the whole audience what you were thinking? All right, over there. Nice and loud if you can.
You want me to stand up?
Sure.
So I am actually a suicidal survivor.
Okay.
32.
Thanks for being here.
I've been through a lot. And my name is Gina Johnson. I'm with a video game charity here locally, geared towards combating bullying using video games. So one of the strategies that a lot of social needs that we have identified as an organization is there's 250,000 gamers here. A lot of them are kids, a lot of them are teens or adults. There's not really a social space. If there is, it's usually your home with your sibling, and that's if your internet is working. So one of the solutions that we have been trying to figure out, one of the strategies, is just being open to new ideas. I submitted a question. I'm going to just submit it kind of now. But the question is there's a new mental health service called Hero Journey Club. I would encourage everyone to write it down. It is an online counseling service. It uses if you have a Nintendo Switch or a Nintendo Switch Lite, it's basically group counseling for kids any age, as well as adults. And you play and talk to other gamers online in a small group licensed by a master's degree, state licensed individual. Group therapy sessions once or twice a week, and it's something that's helpful. I think the future strategies that we need to consider is not just the items available here, but for indoor strategies. Folks who don't like the outdoors, folks who are stuck home because there's nowhere to go that they like, folks who don't want to play physical sports. It's not always a simple answer. So Hero Journey Club is one of those that is trying to start, and insurance does accept it on some levels. But until we can get the wait list from 3 years down to like 3 months, most people are not going to get the help they need. So I would really encourage everyone to really consider gaming. And the name Ryan Douglas, he is a really amazing advocate that spoke at 2023 Hack Fort. I encourage everyone to look at that as a strategy.
Thank you for sharing. Is there one other way, because I really want a specific concrete thing that you thought about that you could do to increase connection in your realm? Yeah.
Maybe this is a very low impact, but I'm an architect and I love to draw. So when I was reading the chart, I was thinking that if I was to participate with youth, I would love to teach them how to draw.
Yes.
And through drawings, help them to understand their feelings or express their emotions. Because sometimes expressing emotions is very hard through through words. But, sometimes, if you draw them, you may be able to identify them. And also, I can be a mentor if they want to do architectural,
That's not low impact at all, y'all.
No.
That's,
expressions.
I just want to
huge,
highlight
yeah.
this thing, which is none of us, as you notice, none of these things require you to be a mental health care professional, right? Every single one of us can help a youth or several youth make connections. And if we do it together as a community, we will change the youth mental health crisis. And I'm a researcher, I'm not supposed to say absolutes, but we will see that change. And so I love that example. Thank you for sharing that with us. And if you have ideas like that and you want to really get into this initiative for Communities for Youth, please email them to me or visit our website, and we will hook you into the community groups that will start again in the fall. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate it so much.
Want to pause for any other questions for Megan before we moved into a new activity?
Any other questions? We've been,
There's
What?
you.
yes.
Is there any, I've got a loud voice. Is there any social outlet? When I was bringing up kids, we had dances and we had things like that. Is there like a coffee shop we could get them to? We could for older children. I'm talking about like 16 to 19 because that's.
Yeah, I think that's
Our ages
awesome,
are-
and that's where, again, part of the structure is to
Thank you.
collect ideas, both from the data, from the research, and from the community. And in fact, you've hit on one. So part of the Boise community said, we really do need these third spaces for young people. And third space is like a new way. It just means like another thing other than school and home, right? And we do that. And actually, our fabulous partners at JUMP actually heard that early on in a meeting, and they've already done 2 what they call teen takeovers, which is they open up all of JUMP floor 5 and 6 to teens only. It's really cool, and they're going to continue to do that. And you can also join in, right? If you have a space or an organization, we're happy to promote that for you through the initiative, and let us know. And that is how we start creating this community vibe. So thank you for your question. Such a good one.
I saw law enforcement here earlier, but I think they were left. I don't know what to say. Still, a group of kids hanging out together, that's still cool, right? That's still, that's not something that's going to be a big deal. We've teased this kind of activity for a little bit that Maya's going to do. You all had, I think when you came in, there folders that were on the table. And inside those folders, there's a couple forms. This is called, I'll let Maya explain this a little bit better. But those folders, that's when they're going to come into play right now. And the papers that are inside those. And yes, there are people on the
If you need
either
one, raise
side.
your hand.
Pens and extra folders on either side of the room here.
So has anyone done this exercise before, the Dear Man exercise? Yeah, it's a common one. It comes from DBT therapy, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. It's a shoot off from cognitive behavioral therapy. But anyway, we don't have time to go into that, but that would be fun. So it's kind of a way to express some emotion. DBT really helps with regulating emotions. That's what it was founded on. So by Marcia Linneman, I hope I didn't pronounce that wrong. She actually has bipolar herself and wanted to learn a lot about her own emotions, and so she wrote a book and created this theory. So really, it's a shoot off of behavioral theories. Anyway, part of the thing is emotional regulation is really important in DBT. And we know for kids, and some of us, myself, emotional regulation is a good thing to have, right? So it's always a good thing.
I'm not always great at it, but yeah.
Yeah, so always trying. So this is a way to communicate with one. And so I thought to do this, I would think of a common, I think it's common thing for adolescents, kind of a scenario that we could kind of talk through and use the Dear Man, and then you can kind of think of your own scenario. We're not doing any Grey's Anatomy scenarios tonight. We don't have time for that. Pick a easy scenario. And kind of think about how we would communicate that with whoever that conflict is surrounding. So I thought the scenario that I might go with is a teenager who maybe misses curfew, like by 15 minutes. Like never been in trouble, but misses curfew, doesn't understand what the big deal is. And so there's always that argument at the end of the evening when she comes in 15 minutes, late or whatever. That's kind of a one that happens sometimes in theory. Like it's never happened to anyone up here, but it could happen. One thing that is important to realize is, so when we're getting anxious about something, our sympathetic nervous system starts kicking in. And that's the same nervous system that helps us when we're in danger. And so what happens is we go into fight, flight, or freeze mode, even if we're not in danger. So, because we're thinking about Criminal Minds, Dateline, and they're just having a good old time, right? And we've gone to the other side by like 10 minutes after 10. We've gone to the edge. We've seen that Criminal Minds. We know. And I don't want to downplay any traumatic events because bad things do happen. And so I don't want to downplay that. But that's always the first thing that we go to. And my daughter once told me, if you didn't watch shows that say, I shouldn't be alive, you probably wouldn't have as much anxiety over us as you do.
I said the same thing to my mother 25 years ago.
So that much has not changed.
Yeah, much has not changed.
Yes. So I think, when our child comes through the door, we're relieved, right? Like they're safe. But our bodies are still in fight or flight mode. So our bodies are still telling us that there's danger because our bodies haven't caught up with our brains. Because our body is so keyed up because we've been anxious and nervous that our brain says, they're safe, everything's fine, but our body is still like, there's something wrong. And so we're ready now to fight, basically. And we don't even realize that. And it's not like we go in and say, I'm going to have a big argument when she gets home. But what happens is it comes from a place of love, right? It comes from a place of concern. So this is the scenario. And if I were to do a Dear Man on that scenario, I wrote notes so I wouldn't forget because there are people listening. That would be bad. So first I would describe the situation, which is D. I would describe the situation with no judgment. So my daughter gets home 15 minutes late. I worry. We get into an argument and she doesn't seem to understand, what the big deal is. Okay, no judgment. That's just what's happening. We're getting into this argument night after night. So then I want to think about what I want to express to her. And I don't want to say, you should be home. This was the rules. It was 10 o'clock. What I want to say is using I statements, meaning stating how I feel. I feel afraid when I don't know where you are and you don't call me. I feel nervous when I can't get a hold of you because I love you so much. I feel helpless. I feel like you might be in danger and I don't even know. And that is frightening for me. So putting it on yourself, how you're feeling and letting them know that. So then that would be the express in the I statements. And then you need to assert what you need. I need to know that you're safe. I need to know that if I should be looking for you. I need to know if you need me. I need to know these things. And so then we want to respond well. Hopefully they're responding because this is really meant to be a conversation, right? Saying, well, Mom, whatever. We want to do the goal setting. So what are the goals? So that doesn't mean that when we goal set and we negotiate, it doesn't mean we still have our boundaries. What is the goal? The goal is that my daughter gets home safe and at the time she needs to be and that she's safe, right? And so that is the goal. And how do we accomplish that? And then we can kind of negotiate, but we have our boundaries as well because we're the parents, so we can't you know. And then we want to appear confident, but I would also say when talking with children, we want to appear open to conversation. That doesn't mean that we give in, but we're open to have that conversation with them. And then we want to negotiate any type of the sub. So I want you to think about an issue that you have, just a minor, no Grey's Anatomy, remember? Just a minor issue. So, and just describe it without any emotion and thinking about that. And how you would think about your feelings and how you would communicate your feelings with that through I statements. So I feel worried, I feel concerned, I feel happy. Right. Then asserting what you need. So what would you need from this conversation? What are you needing? And being mindful of what the goal is. So what would be the goal? And then what are the limits? Like what is where you would say, you know, this is the limit. This is where I have to draw that kind of line, and we have to negotiate around that because this is the line that I have to for your safety, right? So I'm going to let you kind of talk to your neighbors a little bit. There's a little bit, and see how. Do you think this would be effective for you? How did you feel doing this? Kind of, obviously, when things happen, we don't be like, "Excuse me, I have a paper for this," and you know, go through and be like, "Wait a minute, I got to do the steerman thing, and then we'll talk." But as we get in more of the habit of using these things, they might be more and more helpful and more natural to us. So take just a few minutes and kind of discuss how, what you thought about the exercise and whether you would use that. And then we can get some feedback from the audience in a minute.
Now we get to the best part, Q&A. I'm just hearing the different
Yeah,
colors.
I feel, you're in there, I feel sad.
I feel frustrated and sad.
Yeah. I don't know. So about one more minute, and then we'll kind of come back. So anybody want to share what they thought of the activity and whether they would use that?
They've gone rogue.
I know. Must be a good one. So, any thoughts?
That's my favorite part. Getting to the Q&A.
I love all the interaction here in the audience. We're obviously very excited to talk about this.
Good Good job connecting, everyone.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of I feel.
Yes.
And as a parent of younger kids, I'll just share my own thought process because we're struggling right now with responsibility and tasks and starting to get into that freedom phase where, yeah, you can go over to the neighbors, that's fine, or you can go down the street, or you guys can walk to the park, but you have to be,
Yes.
and so not immediately. And Vashti, something you said earlier, jumping over that
Right.
authoritative phase, the authoritarian phase, it's like you have cameras in my house.
I do not, but okay.
Because that happens.
Right.
And we're working on that. But being able to use
Yeah.
this technique
Yeah.
and these strategies, I think is going to be helpful for me to regulate my own emotions
Yes. Yeah.
in this time.
It does.
So.
Is anybody to the point where they feel like they want to share their conversation? Because there seem to be some pretty good ones out there that have to do with the situation. Does anybody feel like they're in a spot where they could? Anybody want to?
No one
Talk
wants
about
to
the
share
situation.
this. It's too gross.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, here in the middle?
Yay.
I think we have a microphone.
Yeah,
there.
there's a
We-
microphone coming.
She's like, I didn't sign up for a mic.
Guess. That's good.
Yes, ma'am. So the description I had, this just happened a month ago. You didn't tell me you would be going somewhere, that you wouldn't be going home after school. I don't know who it was. And then my I statement was I felt worried about you and whether you were okay, and I was afraid whether you were okay, especially as a new driver. I need to know in the future where you are and when you'll be home. Thank you for understanding my anxiety and worry. And I would like just to know if your plans have changed, and I'm open to a conversation about that. And then if something comes up, I'm open. The answer isn't necessarily no, but I need to know what the plan is and when I can expect you to be home. So I'm not worried.
Nice.
I have a question for you there. Okay, so this was something that happened. So I'm assuming that the previous situation did not go as well as what you just described.
Well, did it go badly? We never had an argument about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it went badly. It was just, there were extenuating circumstances.
Sure.
We had an exchange student that suddenly came into our home, and then she wanted to go do all these things, but nobody wanted to communicate that with me. And usually we have a pretty open communication, but I was like, are you coming home today? Like, it's 8 o'clock, and you've been out of school since 4. So it was a little bit of, like, just communicate with me, because I know she wants to go do all these things, and you're trying to make her have a great time, but
Yeah.
also don't let me be stressed all night long.
Right.
Okay,
so
so
it did work out okay.
this would be a good way for your mom to communicate with you in the future, I'm guessing. You'd be okay
write
with this.
on-
Not writing things down.
No, make a copy of the sheet.
Just leave it by
And
the door.
write it
Fill it out
on-
when I come home.
Yeah.
Right.
Kitchen, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I like
That
that.
works.
A stack of them.
Yes. And then poetry slam.
Like a suggestion box.
Yeah.
Right.
Actually, I would like to interject. So some people, I've never done this with a client before, but I've had other counselors that have suggested this, to have a notebook where they write back and forth when things get really tense within a family, because sometimes writing in a notebook can be helpful. And so there is, I mean, not the Dear Man sheet. I'm not sure that that's the whole thing she should do, but there are times when you can have a notebook where you can maybe feel a little bit freer in being able to express yourself in that. So it's a good idea.
When we would have blow-ups when I was an adolescent, my dad, who left very early in the morning for his job, would leave us notes on the next to. He would set out all the breakfast, that was what he did. But we would have a note waiting for us in the morning when
nice.
we came down.
That's so cool.
And that was helpful because there were difficult days, as I'm sure we all experienced. But yeah, that was an effective way to start the smoothing and recovery process for us.
I think we've had, this is the question time we're going to get into, right? Because we had a lot of these questions kind of submitted online. A lot of people kind of, when they registered, had some questions for the panel. And we're just going to kind of go through a few of them right away. And I think to start, I think this one that probably is everybody's been wondering about, the social media question, the phone question, you know, the use of social media contributing to teen anxiety and depression. People try to limit their time. Parents try to limit kids' times on the phone. You can only use it during this time, whatever. Is there a time? Is there a perfect solution to how much time somebody can be on the phone?
I could talk
Or
to
on
it
social
from
media.
like the data or the research perspective, and y'all aren't gonna like it.
They're not.
It's good and bad in the research. And I know we hear one story, right? We hear the sky is falling, anxiety, all that. And that's a valid story. Don't hear that that's not true. The more time, you even saw it bear out in the Boise data, right? The more time young people spend on a screen, the less socially connected they feel. And social connection is particularly important for young people in Boise, right? So that is true. However, particularly for some of our kiddos, who that might be the only way they can explore whatever it is about themselves, right? You can name whatever topic is not necessarily accessible to them in Boise. That can be very protective. So let's say a young person identifies as queer, right? There may not be other outlets, and that may be a protective space for them. Let's say that person identifies as a gamer, right? And there isn't that community for them, and that it can be protective. And so I would not say it's all bad. However, what we do need to grapple with is putting these guideposts and having conversations with our young people about it. The internet, as you all know, because you're parents, has grown rapidly fast, right? I am of the generation where AOL Instant Messenger, you know, we would like, hi, giggle, 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 5 minutes to wait for our crush to respond, right? And then it was, hi, oh my gosh, they said hi. You know, so that is my experience of the internet, and it is just so much faster and so much full of information. And so I think sometimes when we think about the negative sides of screens and social media, we have to think of it as a symptom of the actual deeper problem. And I know, y'all, I'm in upstream prevention, so I'm like, don't look over there, look deeper, right? Like, look underneath it. So think about why a young person might need or want to spend 5 hours on a screen, right? And think about what might interrupt that for them, right? If there is something cool you can do, like connect with them or go for a walk or go outside or do other things, right? One of the things that is pushing young people online is that us parents, again, doing our best with great intentions, are overprotective now. Right? We are worried about all the risks in the world, so the safest place for our young people to be is home and not with their friends and near us, right? But the problem is then we force them into these situations where they're no longer allowed to kick around the neighborhood in the evening time with their friends. So what will they do? They will go on a screen. And screens also have this added effect, and I think we'll talk about it maybe a little bit later around contagion. But screens now give young people so much information. Information that even, as you all know, if you've had experience with social media and screens, is inundating our systems, right? And young people do not have the coping, the developmental skills to process all of that stuff. I mean, we barely do, right? All of us are sort of onslaught by all the bad news all the time, right? And imagine being a young person with a brain that's not fully developed. Right? Imagine being a young person where your emotions are firing rapidly, right? Which again is normative and totally reasonable for a young person, right? But so you think about, you know, even in my own context, if I remember as a young person, I did not know someone died by suicide unless it was specifically in my school community. And now young people know if a person died by suicide literally anywhere in the world at any time, right? And so you think about that just raised awareness when we know something like suicide is contagious, right? And now they're being inundated with these messages. So instead of like a no screens policy, sometimes I like to think about screens as junk food, right? They're the junk food of connection, right? If you're hungry, you can go through a McDonald's drive-through, right? And you'll satisfy that hunger in that moment. But usually within an hour, you're not feeling great or you're feeling hungry again. Right? And that is what social media does. It's junk food of connection. And so if we can have those simple conversations with young people and be like, hey, if you're on that screen because you're feeling lonely, what is something else you can do that is more effective, right? Like eating a healthier meal than going to junk food. And so sometimes
Well,
that's a helpful conversation.
I would add to that any time a child or an adult is using something to numb or to spend time, it's never a good, even you can do something healthy where you're still trying to push out problems and not think about problems. It's a problem if you're using it to numb feelings or to get a connection or to do something like that. Even something, if you go jogging for 4 hours a day, right? That people would say, oh, they're so healthy. Well, if they're doing that because they don't want to face their problems at home or don't want to do that, that's really not healthy. So anytime somebody's doing that to ignore feelings or not being able to face some of the realities in their life, it's not healthy.
Well, I'm going to dive. Well, go ahead.
I just want to say one more thing. So Jonathan Haidt is a social psychologist. He has a new book, The Anxious Generation. It's really, really good. And he does talk about, to echo what he said, parents overprotecting in the real world and underprotecting online because it's a runaway train, right? We're like, we didn't flash forward to all the what ifs. And you know, the statistics about girls, I do think he brings out some things that are really fascinating that connect to the invention of the front-facing camera. So when selfies started, and kids started curating their online persona, their brand. And there's a quote that I love. It's Caroline Caldwell's her name. She said, in a society that profits on your self-doubt, loving yourself is an act of rebellion. And so these kids, and I think it does affect girls a little bit more, are constantly inundated with messages. You're just not good enough. There's this unattainable sort of like physical appearance thing that is just this onslaught of it. And I think, but kids are smart, right? So I think engaging them in some conversations about who's profiting off telling you this information. Because they're all so stuck with this front-facing camera now. We see it. I have girls, I know. But I do think that book's worth looking at, and I think it's a piece of the puzzle with the mental health crisis, that constant state of comparing every aspect of your life to everyone else at all times with an undeveloped brain.
I think combining that with the contagion part, the social media stuff, and we had a question submitted about social contagion being identified and creating a generation of students who decide they are depressed or anxious as an expectation. Is that something? What do you about that, Maya? I mean, is that something that you've seen in your practice at all?
Yes, and I wrote down some notes.
Notes, love notes.
So I think it's good to, I had said before a little bit about, we really need to know what we're talking about when we shouldn't just throw out depression and anxiety and expect that everybody sees that the same way. So according to the DSM-5 TR, so to be depressed, you have to have this at least 2 weeks of depressed mood, loss of interest or pleasure in all activities or activities you used to enjoy, unintentional weight gain or loss, sleep disturbances, psychomotor changes. That means either acting slower or being faster in our actions or our word or our talk, fatigue or low energy, feelings of worthlessness, hopelessness, or excessive guilt, impaired ability to think or concentrate and make decisions, and recurrent thoughts of death or suicide. That's not just feeling down. And I think that we use the word depressed to state when we're sad or when we have normal adult feelings, when in fact it's important to understand what depression is and what anxiety is on a clinical level. Anxiety is excessive anxious or worrying about things, restlessness and feeling on edge more than half the time, easily fatigued, difficulty concentrating, irritability, muscle tension, and disturbed sleep. So clinically, if you were to come into my office, you would have to meet most of those criteria for me to say, yes, you have depression, or yes, you have anxiety. And so I think just helping kids to understand what is depression, what's a normal feeling of sadness, what is that? We are sad sometimes. What is it when we get depressed or anxious? Anxiety is a normal thing. When it becomes chronic, that's when it becomes a problem. So I think a lot of times just having that education for kids, like, and having a conversation like, okay, when you say depressed, what exactly do you mean by that? How often are you depressed? Are you having trouble? Are you not eating? Are you having trouble sleeping? Are you having, are you not able to relax? What do you mean by saying depressed, and really start talking to them about what that means, and then changing their vocabulary around mental health.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, right? So we did this great thing, right, y'all? We broke stigma open on mental health, but we did not consider the nuance of that conversation. So we just said, everyone can have mental health issues, right? And so now we have a generation of young people fueled by the internet's information overload, identifying or self-diagnosing in these ways, which is not helpful and not healthy, right? And so I think one of the things that we try to help people talk about with their young people is no one can diagnose you except for a clinician. So your friend can't tell you you have bipolar disorder, your friend can't tell you you have anxiety, and you cannot tell yourself. And no one on TikTok, no influencer, right? Because here's the thing that's happening out there, y'all, and we're starting to do these initial TikTok studies where young women, particularly beautiful young women, are now selling depression as a thing, right? So the way they get people to look at their page is by being so beautiful and so sad, right? And they talk to our young people about what depression means. Now, one of the key developmental tasks for teens, as you all likely know, is to build an identity, right? And so it used to look like, remember, I'm aging myself, but like it was like goths, right? We're like, maybe I'm a goth. So today I'm gonna show up in all black. And that's how young people would do the work of like, is this an identity that fits me, right? And the way that we do that is we try it on and we kind of, oh, does this feel right, right? Well, unfortunately now, we have young people identifying, which is very dangerous, with being depressed or with being anxious, right? And so we can understand first, even if you have clinical levels of depression, that is not your identity, right?
Absolutely.
It is a part of you, it is not all of you. And so that's a conversation we need to have with kids. Also, it's very dangerous when these influencers are talking about what depression looks like, and our young people are going, I'm sad, maybe I'm depressed. And then they're getting a litany of ways in which depression looks, right? So when I'm depressed, I sit in my room by myself and I cry, right? Or even more harmful, I harm myself. I get away from people. So literally, folks on the internet, to profit off of our young people, are teaching them how to identify and be depressed. And our young people, because that's normal development, right? I'm building my identity, and if I think I'm depressed because I had a sad moment and then I looked online and someone told me how to be depressed, and now I'm acting that way. And so we need to break that up. And so one of the key messages is no one can diagnose you. You cannot diagnose yourself, only a clinician, right? And so that's when Maya's saying, like, there's these 2 weeks, or Vashti will tell you there's certain patterns to be looking for. And that's when you might help as a parent get them to some help if you really do think it's diagnosed level. But I think our kids need to know there are ups and downs, right? All of us are sad. And if we're sad for a real reason, that's normal, right? That's a good thing. That means our emotions are working the way they're supposed to. There's a question out there.
Yeah, I do want to get to some audience questions before we
Love the claps.
before we run out of time here. We have a microphone headed your way.
I think one thing to point out is that anybody who's being an influencer is doing all the work. They're not depressed.
Correct.
So that's something to point out.
Correct.
Another opportunity for some audience questions here. If anybody has one, raise your hand. While folks are maybe contemplating, okay, we have one right here.
Megan, when you showed those slides at the beginning of comparing Boise kids to the national average, why are Boise kids so different? What's going on?
So I wouldn't say it's just Boise kids. We're seeing elevated rates in Idaho for the last decade. We don't have our hands on really great data, unfortunately, in this state. In 2021, we stopped participating in the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which is a survey that collected these risk and protective factor data for us and other states in the nation, but we opted out as a state. partially because our response rates had gone so low, it was sort of not worth it, right? And also partially, there are problems with the YRBS. For instance, you don't get the data back until 2 years later. So if you think about you're dealing with high school students, well, 2 years later, already half of your population is gone. So you're sort of acting on what? So that's part of it. I would say there are things in the Idaho context that are very good, right? And so I don't want us to think, oh gosh, even though Idaho has these horrible mental health outcomes for young people, right? For instance, we are in the top 10 for at least the last 10 years, you all, in youth suicide rate. That is just a fact. We are in the top 10 in depressive symptomology. That is just a fact. It's happening. And that's part of what we're trying to unpack. What is different, or what is going on for young people, right? But part of it is this contagion that we've mentioned a few times, right? Unfortunately, people think suicide is an individual act, right? Mm-hmm. It's not. It's a socially contagious, and if you read sociology work on suicide, you see that the more the idea is prevalent. And this is why people say, be very careful in the way that you talk about suicide, right? Because the more, if we share, for instance, with young people, oh gosh, everyone's dying by suicide and everyone who is sad is choosing that, that's a very harmful and risky thing to say, right? Now, this conversation is nuanced because a protective thing for someone who is considering suicide is to point blank directly ask them and use the words, right? Do you feel like you want to die? Are you considering that, right? So in that instance, where you are uniquely interested in an individual who you're worried about, you should absolutely have that direct conversation. But we need to be very careful about the hysteria that we sometimes get into and talking about it like, oh, everyone is dying by suicide, right? So there's a little bit of a nuance there. So the answer to your question, I know I went long, is we don't really know exactly why. However, we do know that over at least a decade, Idaho has been in the top of the nation for both of these youth mental health outcomes. And so part of what we're trying to do is unpack why, right? And I will tell you, risk and protective factors in the 3 major communities we're in right now look different. And so there are some things that we're starting to see, and as we expand the survey, the State Department of Education just picked us up. So we are now available for free to every school in the state of Idaho. You all gotta help us with that, because that's gonna be one school by one school, I'll tell you what.
Yeah, and Maya, you can jump in on this too. I do want to talk about languaging a little bit, because what I see, there are kids who are really suicidal, and that needs to be taken seriously. And then there's also kids who they don't have other language to express their level of frustration, and so they will say, "I'm going to kill myself." And so it's greeting our kids with, we take that really seriously, and if this is really where you're at, we're going to connect you with help. But if you are having a hard time expressing other frustrations, we need to find different language. And that's part of sort of discerning and calming some of the being hysteria. I think you used that word just a moment ago. So, and it's nuanced too, but I do think there's some habitual language use that we do see. And so it's teasing that out as a parent. We're going to take this seriously. We are going to connect you with help if that is how you're really feeling. But if you need some more words to express your level of pain and frustration, let's work on that. That's a little, just a small point.
We do know, the last time I looked at the statistics was 4 years ago, but we were one of the top 5 in overall mental health per capita. We were one of the top 5 for completed suicides, and we are about the 48th state for access to behavioral health care. So those 2 things they create a huge gap in needing services. And as some of you might know, the waiting list to get into a counselor sometimes can be quite lengthy to get in. The waiting lists are quite long right now. So,
which is why we want to go upstream.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
We want to change the context that is churning out these bad outcomes.
Yeah, because
Time
we
for
don't
one
have
more
per
here.
minute. Oh,
I just want to ask, when I worked on a hotline one time, and they said that you should ask, have you made a plan? Do we do that?
yes,
Still, I mean, I just wanted to know if that was appropriate still.
yes.
In this age, okay.
When I first went to college, it was still in the olden days, as I tell my students. They used to say, don't talk about suicide because you might put something in their mind. Well, we know that it's already there. And so we know that we can just ask.
We are about out of time, unfortunately. I would encourage everyone to check out the resources on the table of our community sponsors and partners as you go. I'm sure folks will be sticking around if you have additional questions as well. You are going to see another QR code on the screens, a survey of tonight's panel discussion and some feedback on that. Please take a moment and help us out with your thoughts on how things went tonight.
And as far as like the cameras in the room and what KTVB may do with it, I think we're going to talk about streaming it at some point. We haven't decided what that is. But I was also reminded this evening about something that KTVB, Tegna, who owns KTVB, is doing this year. They do these community grant funds for all of the stations or all the markets or the communities where their stations are located. And it just so happens that this year, Tegna is going to be donating or granting to local nonprofit organizations that focus on improving mental health in the communities. So there's an application process that anybody here that has an organization, nonprofit in mind, tell them to apply. It's online at ktvb.com/community, I believe is what it is. But the good thing about that too is whoever receives these, the recipients, decided on a local level. So this isn't going to Tegna in North Carolina to decide who gets the grant money. It's decided by the people here at Channel 7. So if they have anybody in mind, please don't be shy about applying for it, because that's $3,000 that you could have to work toward mental health in the community. So.
And at Boise State Public Radio, this is not a one-and-done event. This is the first in what will be a series of events in this, not this space, but in this mental health space, right? The best way for you to stay informed about what is coming down the pike is to sign up for our weekly newsletter. You can do that at our website, boisestatepublicradio.org. Please give a nice round of applause to our panelists, Megan, Vashti, and Maya. And thank you all for coming very, very much.
And we appreciate your questions, appreciate everybody showing up, because obviously this is an important issue as we kind of left on a kind of a downer note about resources available in Idaho and kind of the situation we're facing when it comes to teen mental health. Hopefully, as you mentioned, this is the process to kind of turn that whole thing around. So thank you all very much for being here.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.